Hello, my name is Catherine Bayliss. I'm president of the Jonathan Bayliss Society. We're doing a special program about seagulls today, and this is because Jonathan Bayliss's birthday was 1926. We're in 2026, and we're celebrating the centenary of his birth. He happened to love seagulls. Our first presenter is Trina Smith. She's a docent at Cape Ann Museum and has a background in biology. Trina lived with and learned from a seagull colony while she studied at the Shoals Marine Lab. Our other speaker is Martin Ray. He's the author of Gloucester Encounters, Cape Ann Narratives of Art in Life, and the natural history blog Notes from Halibut Point. We're so pleased to have Trina and Martin with us today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jonathan Bayliss, in his writing, mentioned gulls dozens and dozens and dozens of times. He called them angels. Today, the angel I'm speaking about is the American herring gull that you see sitting next to me here. Why have I chosen the American herring gull? Well, basically 3 reasons. The first is it is the most common gull in the Northern Hemisphere. The second reason is there is quite a bit of research about the gull, beginning with Nico Tinbergen in the 1930s, 1940s in the Netherlands, and continue today in the United States in many places, including the Shoals Marine Lab on Appledore Island. And the third reason I'm talking about the herring gull is because I have this nice model sitting here to demonstrate the physical attributes. I will begin with the weight. Herring gulls weigh less than 2 to less than 3 pounds, and they're about 2 feet long. Their eyes, you can see their eyes are yellow. They have keen eyesight. The eyes are on the side of the head, so they have a bigger panorama view than we do. And their eyesight is most likely at least as good as human, if not better. They have ears somewhere in there under those feathers, and the ears are very keen, and they can detect nuances in the various calls of when they're calling to each other. So there can be strong calls and weak calls, and they mean something different to the seagull. It has over the eyes, over each eye there is a salt gland, which can remove salt from the blood. This allows the gull to be able to drink salt water or to eat fishy salt fish. They would prefer fresh water, but if they have to, they can then drink the salt water, and the salt will be then excreted through the nostrils and will drip off the end of the bill. The bill is very strong. I have to mention you see this red spot on here. I'll get to that later, but has a strong bill with a hook on the end for grabbing. It can literally hold an egg in its beak without it breaking. The beak leads to the esophagus and to this 2-part stomach. The first part of the stomach has digestive juices, enzymes to digest. The second part is a gizzard that can grind things. One of the things that has always fascinated me about the gulls is that they have pink legs and pink feet. If you notice this first joint on the leg, which is actually way up here, this is not a knee. This is an ankle joint. So their feet actually do bend in the same way as ours. The knee joint is up somewhere farther in the body. And so the feathers. So this is the coloring of the herring gull. White chest, white head, gray feathers, gray back, and the black ends of the wings, black with white spots, what are called mirrors. And then very strong flying muscles in the chest. So what I'd like to do now is a reading from Jonathan Bayliss that shows the wings and the flying muscles in action. But first, because he mentions all gulls as angels, and he mentions another gull, the Maxwell. So I show in this picture, you see two gulls sitting on the roof. The gull on the right is a herring gull, and the gull on the left is a great blackback gull. He calls those gulls in the reading Maxwells. So we have two, they're both angels, but the one on the left is a Maxwell. So in this reading, there are two people in a car riding along the coast and having a conversation. And the picture that will be on your screen while I'm reading this is a photograph by Debbie Hurd. I wish we could rotate scenes every day like the supercilious angels. I watch them enviously when they fly, coasting and wheeling above and below my house, when they dip and soar and twist to catch the western sunlight on the underside of their pure white wings, especially the Maxwells with aristocratic black capes. When squabbling in a swarm after the gurry from a fishing boat on its way back to the harbor, they are not very attractive. But in the upper air, on patrol, alone or with 2 or 3 others, they take my breath away. Nothing on earth seems so beautiful as their principle of least action in coasting on the breeze. When there is no interesting boat passing or collecting lobster pots, when as far as I can tell, the angels are not expecting picnickers on the beach in the inspection of our little harbor valley, they often rise so high and cut so many intentional figures, skylarking higher still and higher from the earth, riding on the air like joyous souls on vacation, that I can't believe they've got food in mind. So now I'm looking at a chart or a graph, a drawing here of the distribution of the gulls, the herring gull in North America. About 2 years ago, ornithologists divided the species of herring gulls into 4 separate species: the American herring gull, the European herring gull, the Mongolian herring gull, and the Vega gull. So from now on, I'll really be speaking about the American herring gull. So if you look at this map, you notice that in Canada and Alaska, the pink area, that is the summer breeding ground of the American herring gull. The blue, all on the coast and in the southeast there, is where they go in the winter in their non-breeding time. So many American herring gulls are migratory. There are also some, if you notice off the Atlantic coast, off of New England, there's a red bar there in the water. But in that area on the coast, many of the gulls are non-migratory, like here in Gloucester. They are non-migratory. Okay. This next graph shows the American herring gull seasonal migration. So it looks like half and half. So that bottom is when they're in their winter grounds, and the top half is in the summer grounds. But actually, if you'll see the underline there on the right, in August, some of them start migrating south in August and keep going on. Some will go all the way into November, and some start coming back in February and are still coming back in March. When they are migrating south, so they're leaving, they've raised the chicks, they're going south for food and warmth, they're traveling singly. So once those chicks are raised, any gulls that were in a pair are now just on their own. So when you look out in Gloucester and you see a group of gulls, you can't tell the males from the females, and they're all just milling around. What are they doing in winter? They're eating, sleeping, eating, resting, eating, preening, eating, running away from predators. This picture that I'm showing now is these are actually not herring gulls. So I have to confess, but this is a laughing gull. But the laughing gull kind of is on the same cycle as the American herring gull, so I felt I could use it. But what you see is the laughing gull in winter plumage. If you look closely, you can see that the heads are light and gray, whereas if they're in breeding mode, they have black heads. But they're just milling around. Somebody is feeding them. They're having a great time. When they are ready to fly back to their summer breeding ground, the birds that have been paired previously may start to pair up. So by the time they get back to the breeding ground, they're paired up. They go back to the same place they were born, and they stay as a pair for life. They are mated for life. When they get back to the breeding ground, they may actually even make their nest as close to where they were the year before. What is more interesting to me, I think, is how did they get to be a pair in the beginning? So when they get to the breeding ground, the old pairs may go back to their previous nest site, make their nest, lay their eggs, and do that. But what about all these new ones who have matured? And so 4 years would be the rate of the age of maturity when they can mate. So the young ones, the new ones, the unmated ones kind of hang out in one particular area of the breeding grounds. The other gulls, the previously mated gulls, are more towards the center of the colony, and the new ones will be pushed kind of to the side. But anyway, how does this work out? How does a herring gull find a mate? Well, it seems like the female makes the first move. And she goes over to a male, she makes herself small, she makes some mewing sounds, she bobs her head, she walks around him, and he may respond in several ways. Nico Tinbergen wrote about 3. One way he can respond is he becomes aggressive and chases other gulls out of that area. The second way is the male may start to make a nest. It's a faux nest, and she may come over and join making the nest with him. Or a third way is she keeps up moving around the male gull, making her sounds, and he eventually will regurgitate food, and she will actually grab it out of his mouth. So this indicates now that they can move on. They're a pair in some way. So next, this is all taking considerable amount of time, and it's mutual. They are participating equally in this dance, if you will, and it will continue. This mutual participation will continue right up until the young chicks fly away. So next they will, after a while of all this mewing and head bobbing, they will mate. The male will jump on the back of the female with a great amount of wing flapping so he doesn't lose his bounce. There's a lot of head bobbing and various vocalizations, and then copulation will occur. When it's over, he jumps down from her back, and they are now a pair. They will stick side by side now until the eggs are laid. So now comes the very interesting, time-consuming activity. They need to find a place to make a nest, and they have to agree on the same place. It can be very time-consuming. There's a story at the Scholl's lab on Appledore Island of a pair of great black gulls that spent so much time looking for a nest, they never had time to raise any chicks. So this can go on until both are satisfied. When they find a mutually acceptable place, they may find more than one. They can make more than one nest, but ultimately the female will only sit in one nest. She may actually start sitting there before she lays her eggs. The eggs will be laid about 48 hours apart. She will lay up to 3 tan brown spotted eggs, and then they will take turns. So now these two that have been together for everything will separate. One will sit on the eggs to incubate and one will be off eating, and then they will take turns. The eggs will start to hatch in about 28 days. The first egg that was laid will be the first egg that hatches, and that will ultimately be the strongest chick and may be the only one that survives. The chicks, when they hatch, are covered with brown and sort of black furry down. Their eyes are open, they are wet, and they are hungry. The parents will sit on them until they dry out, and then by that time they can actually move. To get food, they go back. When I pointed out the red spot on the bill of the parent, the chicks will peck at that red spot. It will cause the parents to regurgitate food to the floor of the nest. The parent will take little pieces and feed all the little chicks, who will then, when they're full, will fall asleep. When they're larger, of course, they can take their own food. This will continue for 10 weeks till they are full grown. A baby seagull will go from being a small chick to regular adult size in 6 weeks. And the actual feeding and caring for the chicks will continue for at least 2 months, if not longer. So you can see in the picture of the chick, it is quite large. It doesn't look anything like the parents. It has a black bill, has black legs. It will keep this plumage for 1 year. The second year, you begin to see maybe some gray coming in over the wings, maybe some white. Third year, a little more. And by the 4th year, they will look like the adult birds. How long do they live? Seagulls are known to live, once they reach adulthood, from 8 to 20 years and up to 30 years. How do we know that? I have to go back to the year 2004 on the Isle of Shoals in Appledore, where in the winter there's nothing there. In the spring, the gulls return to their nesting area, and the scientists and the staff return to their jobs. In 2004, it was quite different. The staff and scientists were fine, but the gulls were very disturbed. Something was going on. It was shortly discovered that a family of raccoons were in one of the houses, and they were eating up all the seagull eggs. So that year, very few seagulls fledged. The next year, only about half of the colony returned. What happened to them? There was no way of finding out. So it was then that they decided to start banding the birds. The birds are now banded. One leg has a government tag, and the other leg has a Appledore tag. And now they are able to figure out where the gulls go in the winter, because citizens will report seeing a gull in the Gulf of Mexico, in Florida, in Indiana, maybe only in New Hampshire. So there's some migrating gulls and some stay close by, but they can also tell the age of the gulls now, because they band the parents in May, which is a terrible job because adult seagulls do not want to be banned, and then the little ones, the chicks, in July. And those chicks will be banned in their first year, so their whole biography will now be known. Where they go, when they mate, when they're 4 years old, when they mate, and so forth. They're also being able to see the changes in population of the gull. And what has been seen over a number of years is a decrease in the herring gull population. So some of the reasons behind the decrease are, one, the fishing industry has decreased, so the fish leavings are not as available. Landfills have been capped, so I think you all know that the herring gull is a great scavenger in the dump. If the landfills are capped, they can't get to them. In certain places, disease like the avian virus is killing off the birds, and also an increase in water temperature encourages events like red tide to happen more often. And unfortunately, seagulls cannot read, so they don't know when it says, do not eat the shellfish. So they eat the shellfish, and of course they died. So this, though, is a very healthy, in this photograph, there's a very healthy gull standing here on the rocks in Gloucester. I live in Gloucester, so I hope the seagulls are always here. For me, the seagulls have become like protective finials on buildings and utility poles, and I hope they are always there. And now I'd like to introduce Martin Ray.
We've been asked to consider seagulls as Jonathan Bayliss' favorite bird. Part of the response has to do with natural history, a description of gulls as we see them. Part of it has to do with their relationship to a particular person. My wife Kay had such a relationship one summer. She'd take an apple core down to the shoreline every afternoon and put it on a rock. A certain gull, somewhat handicapped, would show up immediately to eat it. How did it know? It wasn't visible in the sky or the terrain until that moment, as far as we could tell. Kay tried to get there regularly at 4 o'clock. Another woman in Rockport was adopted by one she called the pecking gull. It started following her home and knocked incessantly on her door until she brought out table scraps. Gulls became important in my life too. I'd see them and hear them almost every day on the quarry at Halibut Point State Park. Even though there was plenty to look at on that grand landscape with the bay in the background, a big part of the picture was missing if the raucous white birds didn't come circling in to rest, to congregate, and to preen. They added vitality to an otherwise beautiful but lifeless scene. I'd miss them if they didn't appear. Look at them! More than any other bird I can think of, gulls seem born to flight. They make it look effortless. I'd watch them ride freely on the invisible air. Can there be both purpose and delight in their travels? Their easy refinement of nature made me happy. Jonathan Bayliss also took note of the gulls around him as an aesthetic pleasure in this coastal environment. He wrote, "I watch them enviously when they fly, coasting and wheeling above and below my house, when they dip and soar and twist to catch the western sun lighting up the undersides of their pure white wings." Gulls formed a picturesque presence in the places he walked. They easily adapted to human architecture. They perched on processing plants and streetlights, scanning Gloucester Harbor for an easy meal. The local paper ran this picture by staff photographer Amy Sweeney of a rooftop occupation on the Fitzhenry Lane house, looking out to sea. Jonathan once made this request to the editor of the Times. "Dear Mr. Nicastro, you have been printing some excellent background articles of interest even to longtime Gloucester residents about their city. This is to request another one about our notorious but useful seagulls. How are they surviving the loss of so much commercial fishing? maybe the excellent Mr. Gaines or one of his new colleagues could tell us a lot about what we don't know about our famously ubiquitous birds. Well, I'm guessing that the paper welcomed such an invitation from an observant reader. Gulls escorted the fishing fleet for a share of otherwise unreachable food. Jonathan presented these opportunists differently from the soaring individuals he admired. He wrote, "When squabbling in a swarm after the gurry from a fishing boat on its way back to the harbor, they are not very attractive, but in the upper air, on patrol alone or with 2 or 3 others, they take my breath away." Those aerial skills may not strike him as elegant in a crowd, nor in plunder. The eye of the beholder interprets as well as reports. Jonathan the novelist merged fact and imagination, the literal and the literary. Looking at his favorite bird, he wrote, "Nothing on earth seems so beautiful as their principle of least action in coasting on the breeze. They often rise so high and cut so many intentional figures, skylarking higher still and higher from the earth, riding the air like joyous souls on vacation, that I can't believe they've got food in mind." Well, now that's something I have to think more about. In my experience, much of a gull's activity seems to involve pursuing food. I personally don't believe there's any implication of morality in this focus. Success means survival. The herring gull hovering above this gannet wants to snatch the fish it caught in a deep dive after plunging from a great height. Each bird is a specialist of anatomy and demeanor. And this gull is flying away with a starfish stolen from the eider that brought it up from the ocean floor. Naturalists call these activities kleptoparasitism. Well, kleptoparasitism is a long and exotic word meaning freeloader. The eider has been victimized. But is one hunter's lifestyle more or less noble than another's? The migration of small schoolies along the shore often attracts a fishing frenzy by various predators from above and below. Relatively small and buoyant Bonaparte's gulls are maneuverable enough to catch them at the surface. Gulls are the least specialized of all seabirds. Individual species have greater or less adeptness in swimming, flying, and walking. The relatively small and light Bonaparte's gull sits cork-like on the water in the foreground of this picture. It darts tern-like in the air. It excels at plucking food on the wing or dipping tiny organisms at the surface. The heavier herring gull to the rear in this photograph, our common local bird, features the anatomy of a generalist built to soar, swagger, and float under all sorts of conditions. With a little experience, you can distinguish them just by their size and movements. Somewhat intermediate between those local species are laughing gulls. They exhibit long, tapered, arched wings for aerial endurance and versatility. They are able to take off quickly or hover simply by facing into the wind and extending their wings. 2 types of white-winged gulls visit Cape Ann irregularly in the winter. One of these is the Iceland gull, whose coloration matches the polar region where it originates. It presents a pleasing dove-like purity on the wing. Gulls are typically coastal or inland species. They rarely venture far out to sea. Kittiwakes are an exception, rarely coming close to shore. They are distinguished by wingtips said to be dipped in ink. Like other gulls, they can drink both fresh and salt water. Special glands help their kidneys filter out extra salt from their system and excrete it from grooves near their nostrils. Gulls have unhingeable jaws that provide the flexibility to consume large prey or to invite themselves to a picnic. The larger species with stout legs and heavy, slightly hooked beaks resemble crows in their adaptability to the spoils of urban life. Along the shoreline, they forage at low tide. This great blackback gull is about to plunge for crabs and shellfish in shallow water. When they congregate noisily at Halibut Point, you have to wonder whether the gulls are sharing information, challenges, or just socializing noisily. And then there's the question of staying warm in winter. For both aerodynamic reasons and conserving body heat, the gull's muscles are centered at its core. Ligaments and tendons stretch out to the extremities to power its feet and wingtips, which are colder than the rest of the body because the blood circulatory system concentrates to the interior. Inner layers of downy feathers provide insulation. Intricate muscles in the gull's wings and tail control flight feathers individually, yet in concert, with far more versatility and subtlety than our mechanical craft. That maneuverability enables gulls to mobilize against hawks in the sky where they can harass and peck at their bulkier rivals. Here you see silhouettes of the two for ready comparison. The broad wings of the raptor enable it to soar economically while hunting prey far below. The smaller body and narrow wings of the gull give it sharper speed and turning ability. Liking gulls is a little like having a fondness for dandelions, another weedy feature in our landscape. If they weren't so plentiful and boisterous, we would be astounded by them. They both have a willful intelligence and a graceful mastery of the air. On their own turf, they're beautiful. When they come on yours, though, you might want to wear a hat.